Hi, I'm Gannon, and welcome to my podcast, The Franchise Accelerator. As the founder of the Largo Group, I have provided accounting services with a specialty in the hospitality industry over the last decade. I have prided myself on finding a way to work with my clients, not just where their businesses are today, but working with them to scale. What I've realized over the course of this work, this mission, is that the common challenge for business owners is how to scale. How can you go from one location to many locations if there's just you? This is why we've started the Franchise Accelerator, because inside you is a great idea that can scale. And with the right tools, the right techniques, you too can create a franchise, a brand that's more than just you grinding it out, working 80 hours a week, and sacrificing for your business. You can create a brand that can stand alone and can truly create financial wealth for your family. I'm so excited to be a part of your journey, and I look forward to being with you every week as we join on this adventure together.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for this week's episode. I am so excited to be joined by Wally Bressler. Thank you so much for taking the time to spend with us today.
Yeah, thanks for letting me join you today. I'm excited to be here. And we've got kind of a little home and home thing going here. So I'm excited to have you join me in another week or so. So this is going to be fun.
Yes. So for those that don't know, can you tell us a little bit about your background and what led you to today?
Yeah, my background isn't exactly like everybody else's background. This isn't going to be like, all kinds of good things along the way. I actually had a really very troubled childhood. In fact, the good stuff, I've been in the real estate industry for 25 years. I've been coaching real estate agents and other salespeople for about 22 of those years. I've been very fortunate. I published my first book last year, and I was on a nationally syndicated TV show called, Times Square Today, last November, right around Thanksgiving. So I've been pretty fortunate to have some really good things happen in my business life. But what I'm able to do to help people now is really a result of the things that I went through in my life and the tough time that I had. And that kind of ties into how, basically I help people overcome procrastination, self-sabotage, perfectionism, I see your eyes. Yeah, and it's it's funny. 60% of salespeople have a very strong need to be liked, and that need for approval, that need for acceptance is high in a lot of us, and a lot of it has to do with what happened when we were kids. But the short story here is that my parents were good people. They just weren't good parents. The only Italian people. I mean, you're Irish, right? That last name Gannon. That's about as Irish as it gets, right?
Yes.
Right. So I'm Italian, so maybe you'll appreciate some of this, but. When you grow up in an Italian family, you get communicated with three ways. There's food, there's being hit, and there's being yelled at. Okay. And so not unlike, your average Irish family, right? Lots of I've had some Irish friends and some Italian friends get together. It's Armageddon. But basically, so, when I was younger, my parents both had a tough time because they both had parents, that were from Italy. And so my dad, when I was 3, 4, 5, my punishment would be to be sent to bed without dinner, which is tough because it created a real fear of being hungry in me. And so it sparked off about a 45-year addiction to food. I was had a binge eating disorder. I got up to 480 pounds at one point. So it was pretty bad. And then when I was 10, I was sexually abused. When I was 11, I started looking at pornography. I got some of my dad's magazines up in his top drawer. And then when I was 12, I started engaging in sexual activity. And then that entire time, I was bullied at school. And so by the time I was 14, I really hated myself. There's people we're talking to here. I know there's people listening who went through some of the same things, either physically, emotionally, sexually abused, or they were bullied, or they had parents that weren't present, or parents that were alcoholics. And so what happens is that triggers our fight or flight response, and specifically our flight response. And so I lived my entire life in fear and spent, most of my youth and my young adulthood, doing everything I could to outrun shame. So, I was a collegiate athlete like you were, and I led it all 4 years. I went to a really good school, good high school. I was making $100,000 a year by the time I was 28. And married with 4 kids, but the entire time I'm doing all these things, I'm out running, being addicted to food and pornography and sex and money. And so I just, and I kept pushing it away, and it kept coming back. And, I ended up, I probably wasted about $5 million in my life by just using money to try and get people to like me, and just not, I grew up poor. So I had no real appreciation of how to use money properly. Obviously as an accountant, you're probably, and being in the accounting field. By the way, does anybody still balance their checkbook? My mom used to do that religiously every month. I always
You'd be surprised. Yeah.
My mom and my aunt was accountant. I wanted to ask you that. So, but anyway, I digress. And so, what happened is in 2005, 2006, I was doing some real estate investing, and I got connected with somebody, and, we were doing business, and he lied at about $15 million worth of mortgages. I don't know if you remember what happened to the Great Recession, but business was the Wild West. And so even though I wasn't trying to steal money, I was involved with something where money got taken, and I had to accept responsibility for being there. So I spent 366 days in federal prison on 1 count of mail fraud. So, and most people would think that would have been the bottom, but it wasn't. A year after I got out of prison, I met a woman, and I did such a terrible job in my first relationship. I really hadn't worked on any of my challenges. And so I wanted to have a good relationship. And so I was in a very toxic relationship for 4.5 years with a woman. And I asked her to marry me. She accepted an engagement ring from me. And she finally would not move down to Texas to be with me. She was in another state. And so I said, I can't do this with you. I broke up with her. A week later, I found out that she was actually still married the entire time we were together, and that she had lied to me about everything. And so that, for me, that was like the last bad decision in a bunch of bad decisions, you know what I'm saying? Yeah. And so in October of that year, I decided I was going to take my own life. And I didn't end up doing it, obviously, but I was sitting right here where I am now and thinking about how I was going to do it. And then, my dad died when I was 23. My sister was 19, my brother was 17. And I just was like, I had a conversation. He's like, remember how horrible it was for you? I'm like, yeah, I do. And so that was my rock bottom, for lack of better terminology. And so I decided then I was going to work on myself, and working through all this stuff for myself, I started realizing that, people, anybody, I'm saying, there's tons of people. I mean, you have your own business, right? I mean, you're an entrepreneur, you're self-employed, and there's so many people that would love to do that, but just can't do it because they just can't get out of their own way because of shame or procrastination or perfectionism and all those things we talked about. And by going through all that myself, I spend most of my time helping entrepreneurs and salespeople, but not just those, other people too, really get through what happened as a child and how it's impacted them over the last 20, 30, 40, 50 years, to the point where, they can't, pick up the phone and make a phone call. They don't want to get in front of a video camera. They don't want to step in front of people that, they want more. They just can't get out of their own way. And that's what I help people do. But I went through all of that to get there. So that's probably wasn't the background you were thinking you were going to hear, but
that was a great background, though.
I mean, it shaped who I am today. It always, it's funny. I'm kind of torn because, I wouldn't be who I am today without that. Yeah. But there was, there's that book, Would you rather, would you rather, go back and do it all over again, or would you do this? And I'm like, I don't know if I'd want to do it all over again. It was pretty horrible. So, but now, I can, I help people change their lives every day,
It's such an amazing story. And I give you so much, credit for being so open about it. Cause I think you're right. There's so many people out there that have struggles and they don't talk about it, or they're ashamed of it. And they really shouldn't be. But what would you say when you approach someone for the first time, or, start to work with an entrepreneur? What do you think is the place to start? Like, if you know that you're, on the need of a life change, where do you start?
Well, we go back to the beginning. I'm saying? We go back to find out what it was that started the whole issue, whatever it was. I mean, you've probably heard this before, but awareness is literally the linchpin of change. Right? Without being aware, we can't fix anything, That'd be like going to the doctor and saying, hey, my head hurts, and the doctor says, okay, lay down, we're going to operate. You're like, whoa. Can you ask a few questions? Right? We got to go right in. So, I'm saying, that's the whole point, though. We got to go find out what it is. And that awareness is literally the launching point of solving everything. And, may I give your audience a quick tip? Yeah. So look, so if you listen, if you have trouble sleeping at night, if you have trouble going to bed, and then you wake up and you got all kinds of things swirling through your mind, if you find that you need to do your dishes when you have so many other things to do, if you can't keep a calendar, if you can't continue at the gym consistently, if you can't keep a diet, if you have goals that have been written and rewritten in 14 different colors, you never reach them, you got a vision board that's collecting dust on it. If you just seriously, right? If you feel like you're not good enough or not worthy, it all stems from something that happened with you were a kid. And, we've been talking for the better part of 10 minutes here. And so some people, they've been listening, their brain's already gone back and said, oh, I remember that, But here's the thing, like, we have to find out what it is that caused it, because first of all, it's not your fault, right? If you're a procrastinator or perfectionist, or if you have had terrible relationships with men or women or whatever, where we are today, I mean, we have to accept responsibility for the actions we've taken, but we're not bad people. We just made bad choices because we had a bad operating system. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
It's not our fault, but it's our responsibility to fix it, So after we're done here, after you're done watching this, whenever it is, go get a couple of note cards. You perfectionists, you can just rip a piece of paper in half. You don't need to get note cards. Right? Perfectionists, I got a note card. So anyway, and I get that because I was like that most of my life, but get a couple of note cards or a couple of pieces of paper, and all I want you to write is, hey, what is the source of my, and then just put it, procrastination, or what is the source of my perfectionism? If you have trouble getting on the phone, what is the source of my call reluctance? What is the source of my trouble getting in front of a camera? Why do I keep getting in relationships with the wrong people? Why am I staying in a relationship with the wrong person? Whatever it is that's like at the top of your pain list, ask that question on both those. You keep one with you, read it all day, put the next one next to your nightstand, on your nightstand, and read it before you go to bed. Right? When we go to bed at night, our subconscious is busy at work trying to make sense of everything that happened, not just that day, but all the stuff we still haven't made sense of. I mean, I think I'm a little older than you, but did you have the librarian with the books and had the cart and was walking around with like,
Yeah.
right? It had the slanted,
Yeah.
the books would lay, right? So, it's kind of like what your subconscious does at night. It's like, okay, oh, look at this. This happened today. This is great. Oh man, I got bullied for being fat in the school. Let's leave that on the floor. Oh, I never thought I was good enough because my mom always compared me to my sister. Right. And so all these things that we haven't made sense of don't make it on the shelf. They sit on the floor. Right. So some stuff, but the point is eventually those things start to pile up, and then the cart starts bumping into those things. And that's your brain going, hey, we've got to deal with this. Right. You get a cut, it gets infected. Your body's like, hey, we got to treat this.
Right.
You get anxiety, you get depression, you get sleeplessness, you get procrastination, perfectionism. That's your brain saying, hey, let's go. And when you're at bed at night, that's when your subconscious really goes to work. And it's literally the reason it's waking you up, is going, hey, there's clearly something we need to attend to here. But once you do this note card exercise, you will get a tremendous amount of clarity. It's funny, and because it's kind of a double-edged sword for people. They're like, oh my God, that's where it comes from. I never made the connection,
Yeah.
Sometimes they make the connection and they just deny it. But then it's like, oh man, I've got to get to work. There's a great video I show my clients from Will Smith. It's called Fault versus Responsibility. It's about 2.5 minutes, but he talks about it. He's like, it's not your fault that your father was an alcoholic. It's not your fault that your husband or wife cheated on you. It's not your fault that all these things happen, but it is your responsibility to fix it, And I try and put it this way. I mean, the average life expectancy in the United States is about 79 years. Right. So, right. And if you believe David Sinclair, he's a longevity specialist from Harvard. He thinks that in 10 years, humans will be able to live another 40 years. So that puts us at like 120 years. You know what I'm saying? So, but the question is wherever you are in life, if you were to live another 40 years, or if you had to live to 79, could you live with what's going on and what's happening? Could you continue to do that? My answer is, I hope no. I mean, we get used to our own dysfunction. Like we'll put up with anything, but eventually it keeps coming back up, right? I mean, our brains have a very specific job: keep us alive, keep us safe, make sure we understand things, make sure we get clarity and peace. And so we push it down with drugs and alcohol and food and perfectionism. And as soon as that wears off, our brain's like, okay, still here,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And so, but if you don't deal with it, it'll never go away. And that's how I got to be almost, basically 50 years old and wanting to put a gun in my mouth, addicted to food and sex and pornography and money, I mean, and because I kept pushing it down. I kept picking it back up and pushing it down. I kept pushing it back up. And eventually, your brain, and then you can get PTSD from leaving those things unattended to,
Yeah.
And, I guess, my goal, besides creating a much better life for my children than my parents did for me, or I even did for myself, is to make sure that people realize they don't have to hit rock bottom in order to create a great life for themselves.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So what are some of the strategies that you can talk through, because I think perfectionism is interesting. I think a lot of entrepreneurs or, type A people, it really is something that is the, flip side of being an achiever.
Yeah. And quite honestly, you could argue that people in your field might have a stronger slant towards perfectionism than other people because the numbers have to be right.
Yes.
Right? Like you can't be a CPA and bad tax returns, right? That's like, what I'm saying?
Right.
I'm not wrong, right? I mean,
perfectionism is the real thing.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Right. I mean, my roommates, one of my roommates, when I was working in Boston, he went and took there was a three-part test to get your CPA or something like that. Dude, I'm surprised he didn't become an alcoholic over that test. But anyway, so, great question. And so perfectionism is just another fear-based strategy. It's just a way of you protecting yourself from rejection, being hurt, not being good enough, right? That need for approval is ginormous in our society. And all you have to do is spend like 30 seconds on TikTok, 30 seconds on Instagram, what I'm saying, seeing all the videos, the half naked people and the, I did this, or this is why people don't like me. It's just the need for approval. I mean, look, according to Abraham Maslow, it's a basic need, right? Significance is a basic need. It's one of the 6 basic needs, right? Or human needs, not basic needs, human needs. So significance makes sense. We all have it, but when it starts to become such an issue that it prevents us from being happy and living a good life, that's where it's a problem. So let me tell you a quick story. I've got a friend here, a client of mine and a friend in Dallas. And a beautiful woman, was a monstrous perfectionist, thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars a year on hair extensions and eyelashes and nails and teeth whitening and, all brand name clothing and a Mercedes and $5,000 purses and everything. Like, would not leave her house unless she looked like she was going to be on the cover of Cosmopolitan. Right. But here's where it stemmed from. And this is the other thing. You don't have to have a train wreck of a life like I did, the childhood that I did. When she was in 5th grade, she wore dress shoes to gym class. And the kids made fun of her because she was wearing her gym clothes with her dress shoes. And they made fun of her and made fun of her and made fun of her. And she decided through that experience that she never wanted to be rejected or made fun of again. So her strategy is, look, if I look perfect, if I sound perfect, if I do everything perfectly, then that can't happen. But what's the main problem with perfectionism?
You'll never get there.
It's impossible, right? So it's a strategy for failure, right? And so if that makes sense. So it's literally this vicious circle of trying to be perfect and, oh my God, and never happening. And it's just horrible. My parents were perfectionists. My dad, I'll never forget this. I was probably 12. We were making an omelet in the kitchen. My dad cooked in the service and he cooked a lot. He always wanted to have a pizza and sub shop. We had a catering business when I was a kid, but we were making an omelet and he went to flip the omelet and it didn't show up right. It didn't flip over right. And he goes, God, he started swearing. I go, it doesn't have to be perfect. And he looked at me and goes, yes, it does. And he threw it out. So perfectionism certainly can be learned, but it's a strategy to deal with fear of rejection, fear of not being accepted. So part of the strategy is doing the no card strategy. The other thing you can do if you have perfectionism is you've got to start doing things and saying things to yourself to help you understand that you're good enough just the way that you are. Because we all are. Like, there's nothing that I could do to make somebody accept me. Not only that, but somebody could tell me that they accepted me, but if I didn't accept myself, it still wouldn't happen, right?
Oh, yeah.
Brene Brown's got a great book called The Gifts of Imperfection.
Yeah.
Right. It's an awesome book. And it talks about, first and foremost, which is just owning who you are with all your imperfections, because you are imperfect, and getting to the point where you accept the fact that you are who you are and that the people that don't like you, it's okay. I created this theory. It's called Bressler's theory of Brussels sprouts. Do you like Brussels sprouts?
No.
Neither do I. But the people who do like them are dead to me. Okay, I'm kidding. But Brussels sprouts are horrible. They're like, oh, just cook them in oil with bacon.
No.
Pickles and crisp them up. I'm like, you could do that to a flip flop and it would taste good. The whole point is, if you got to do that much to something to make it taste good, it can't be that good, right?
No.
But is it the Brussels sprout or is it us? It's us. It's the same Brussels sprout, right, for everybody.
Right.
So if I had perfectionism issues, I would just find a way to accept who I was as I was. Part of that would be doing some affirmations. There's on YouTube, there's tons and tons of recordings of self-love affirmations that you can listen to and walk along and say out loud. I would read the book, The Gifts of Imperfection by Brene Brown. I think that's a really good one. I would also do some mindful meditation. One of the things that my clients do is go to the mindful movement on YouTube, because here's what happens. Since we're kids, any emotion that comes in, it does whatever it wants to do, right? Sadness, happiness, joy, anger, jealousy, whatever that feeling is, whatever that emotion is, it just comes right in and does what it wants, right? Because nobody taught us that we had to control our mind and teach our brain what to accept and what not to accept, right?
Yeah.
So if you go and work on some mindful meditation, meaning, listening to somebody guide you through being mindful and focusing on just the here and now, like you can't focus on the anxiety and fear of the future. You can't focus on the sadness and anger and depression of the past. All you can focus on is now. And when we force our brains to not let those disempowering thoughts in, eventually our brain gets the net and it says, oh, when this crap comes up, when I start feeling crappy about myself, I don't feel crappy about myself. And when I start comparing myself to somebody else, I don't do that anymore. And then your brain starts doing the work for you, and it starts keeping out all these intrusive, debilitating, disempowering thoughts. And eventually you're not going to give a rat's ass what other people think about you. But it takes work though, because our brains, we've been letting them do, like they're like a drunken sailor. They've been doing whatever they want to do as long as they want it to do, and now they got to go to bed at 8 and get up at 5 in the morning and eat a good diet and not anymore. So they're not a big fan of that. But eventually your brain has to listen because you're in control.
Yeah. That was an awesome answer. I love that. But I love the analogy of the Brussels sprouts.
Thank you.
So talk to us a little bit about how this ties into selling. Like, how did you come about writing your book? And
Right. So as far as how it ties into selling, I said earlier that 60% of salespeople, entrepreneurs, they have a very strong need to be liked, and that need to be liked prevents them from doing things where they could be rejected, where they could feel less than. Interesting enough, as collegiate athletes, we get a stupid amount of accountability, partially because somebody's writing a check for us to go to school at one level and never write. So they kind of like, oh, well, you want more money? We're going to do more for us, right? You remember that time, right? The 5:30 circuits in August when everybody was still drinking at home. So anyway, not that I'm angry or bitter, but no. But the whole point is people don't like accountability because of their self-esteem, because they don't want to let people down, because they don't want to seem like they're less than. And that's what happens with salespeople and entrepreneurs. When it's time to get on the phone, that fear of not being good enough, that fear of rejection, that pain of whatever happened when they were a kid that triggered their flight response, it rears its ugly head. But if I can go through the process that I teach people of becoming aware and rewiring their brain and whatnot, we can do that. And you can overcome all that, because it's one of these things where we're afraid what other people are going to think of us. We're afraid of being rejected, not being approved of. And that keeps us from doing the things we need to do to be successful in not just in sales and anything. Who was it? Remember Sergio Garcia with the yips? Remember all the yips he had?
He's my favorite golfer, by the way.
I'm just saying, I saw him at Bethpage Black when he was there with when what's his name?
Oh, it was awful. It was so
terrible. The crowd was riding him, but all that is just it's that movie that's going on in your mind from something that you haven't dealt with, that's saying, hey, we've got to deal with this. And it was terrible because he's such a nice guy. So, anyway, so how I figured it out was I was going through everything myself, working on myself, and one of my clients, a firefighter in Greenville, South Carolina, his name is Brian O'Neill. And really good guy. This guy walks in and out of burning buildings, carries people out on dead people. He deals with like the toughest of the toughest stuff. And so we were working together, and he'd been doing it for 21 years. We were working together. And I said, okay, well, your plan's in place. It's time for you to get on the phone and start making some calls. He's like, no, I don't make calls. Like, what do you mean you don't make calls? I'm like, you save dead people. You bring them back. You walk in and out of buildings that are burning. Like, he's like, I know, but I just can't get on the phone. And I said, like, this little 6-ounce piece of plastic here? He's like, yeah. So I'm like, okay. So I looked at what I've been going through for myself. I had sales call reluctance for 10 years myself. And I started just thinking about it and going through everything with him. And then about 45 days later, he calls me. He says, hey, I just got a $500,000 listing. I go, great. That's awesome. I go, where'd you get it? He says, oh, it was a FISBO. I was prospecting. And I was kind of like, I what? He's like, yeah, I was prospecting. I said, really? He goes, yeah. He says, in fact, he's got another $750,000 house that I can get probably in the next 6 months. And so that was kind of the genesis of the whole process. And now in the last, I don't know, 2 years, I've helped, probably 150 real estate agents and salespeople overcome all kinds of stuff related to that, And so, yeah, and somebody who was an accountant actually overcome not just getting on the phone, but overcome some of those challenges too. So, but yeah. And so, the writing my book was, interestingly enough, was actually part of the healing process, because worrying about what other people are going to think about you, and spending a lot of time on something that's completely out of control can be like just horrible. I'm saying, speaking of debilitating, it can keep you like from moving forward at all. And I'm like, well, what if they find out if I was sexually abused when I was a kid? And what if they found out I wasted all that money, or that I cheated on my wife, or that I went to prison? I kept thinking about all these things because I'd been hiding from it for so long. And I was sitting on my couch, and I'm like, and all of a sudden I'm like, that's it, screw it, I don't care. And I literally went on live on Facebook, and I just told my entire story. And then I went to Instagram and told my entire story. And then I went to my business, and I just did it like 3 or 4 times. And I just got it out there, right? Because once you own it and accept it and realize that it's you, who you are, it's out there. Not only that, but you take all the power away. Hey, Wally, you're a convicted felon. I am. You've had, you've never had a good relationship with a woman in 50 whatever years. You're right, I haven't. There's nothing you can say to hurt me, because I have already, I'm saying I accept it. Once you accept that, your ability to move forward is incredible. And so that writing my book was kind of like the rest of the cathartic going through him. I'm just going to say it. I'll put it out there.
Yeah.
Interestingly enough, when I was going through my court case, it happened in New Hampshire, my hometown. I lived in New Hampshire, my hometown. And, the reporter who was covering our case for the 5 years that it was covered and went on, every time something came up about the case, whether I was involved or not, he brought up my name. So on the internet, newspaper, I'm like, why are you doing this to me? I'm like, I got to tell the story. I'm like, you've already told the damn story. But I sat there in fear and in anguish and misery, every time my name went in the paper. So the shame just was, So, but that shame will go away almost as soon as you accept it and realize that it's part of who you are, and it happened for the reason, and that, it's not your fault. But does that make sense?
No, that is such an awesome answer. I mean, I think you have such an amazing insight.
Thank you.
Into what so many people go through.
Hard earned.
Yes, no,
Hard
definitely.
Yeah.
So I guess tell us a little bit about your program, how people can learn more about you.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. Yeah, I appreciate that. I work, the name of my company, Trigger Sales System. I've worked mostly with salespeople, in real estate, but I've worked in other industries as well. I've also worked with digital marketers, telesales groups. I have worked with a few people who are not salespeople. Last couple of rounds, I've worked with some people that were secretaries, administrative assistants, accountants, things like that, because we all have challenges that have come up. Find me a person who said they had a normal childhood, and I'll find you a liar. And it's funny because, it just as an aside, and I'm like, hey, how was your relationship with your parents? They're like, oh, it was great. I'm like, how about you? They're like, oh, it was great. And then when we get, and oddly enough, one of the biggest sources of perfectionism and horrible relationships is people that parents have never fought. If your parents never fought in front of you and never taught you how to see what conflict is, and that it can be resolved, you have no interest in getting in any sort of confrontation and conflict, because it scares the bejesus out of you, because you were never taught to deal with it. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So, but yeah, so I mean, it's an 8-week class, and it's called, it's a call reluctance class, but it really has nothing to do with the phone. It has everything to do with overcoming the stuff that's been keeping you from living a rich, happy life and creating a great business for yourself. So, I help people identify the source of where the problem came from. I teach them how to deal with their emotions at the point of attack, so they can start letting them go instead of stuffing them down. And then the next couple of weeks, we rewire their brain and then really help them figure out what they want. And then the last couple of classes are about how to really determine what your true why is. Because a lot of people are walking the planet going, what's my why? What's my why? What's my why? And they think it's a car, they think it's their kids, they think it's a house, they think it's money. And really what it is, and this, Simon said it best, and find your why is like, your why is a combination of some sort of pain that you felt, or that you don't want to feel anymore, you don't want anybody else to feel, and your ability to impact the outcome over something, to contribute something so that you can get a good result. So your kids aren't a why, but making sure that your kids have money after you die and what you need to do to make that happen because you grew up poor, that's a why.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. Oh, those are such good answers.
Yeah. Thank you. So last to answer your question, I mean, here's the thing. I want to help people. I mean, I'm committed to helping people. If you go to my website, triggersalessystem.com, triggersalessystem.com, same as spelled over my right shoulder there, or my left shoulder, depending on how you're watching this. And you can go ahead and grab a free half hour on my calendar. No questions asked. I'm not going to try and sell you anything. I mean, if you want to hear about what I do and it makes sense, great. But if you give me 10 or 15 minutes, I'll tell you exactly why you're experiencing what you're experiencing. And that's the first step in healing.
Oh, that's an amazing gift. So yes, I hope lots of people take you up on it because that really is an amazing gift.
Yeah, it all stays with me.
Yeah.
I don't tell anybody anything. I've been a coach for 22 years. You can't be a coach in the life and business world and have loose lips. So whatever you say stays with me. Here's the thing, I don't judge you. I mean, I've made more bad choices and bad decisions and mistakes than any two people I know. So, I mean, there's nothing you can tell me that I haven't even heard or probably done myself.
Oh, that's awesome. No, yeah. I mean, what you're giving back to people is truly amazing.
For sure, yeah. You work with lots of entrepreneurs yourself, right? You work in the service industry, so you got lots of folks who are in high pressure positions anyway.
Oh yeah, hospitality industry. So,
yeah, for sure. Service, I'm in hospitality. Sorry,
yeah.
It's ugly. You know what I'm saying? And it can be tough.
Yeah, and just bringing awareness to that, because like you said, I think it does affect day to day and reactions, and and just catching that pattern is huge for
everything.
Life change.
There's a guy named Gary D. Rodriguez. I don't know if we're going too far. I'm sorry if we go too long here, but there's a guy named Gary D. Rodriguez. He's an amazing business and life coach. He has a great saying. He says, life doesn't happen to us. It happens from us. And back what we're giving out. People say it happens for us, which I agree, but you're getting back what you're giving out.
Yeah.
And if you're somebody whose feelings are easily hurt, or you feel like you're a victim or whatever, then you're going to get a lot of that back. That's what you're sending out. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that is such a great way to put it. It's so good.
Thank you.
Well, thank you so much for taking the time. We really appreciate it. And I wish you best of luck.
Thanks, everybody. Make sure you're kind to yourself. Be kind to yourself.